Pacers beat the Nets, and they don't normally win the way they won this game. They dominated the paint. Pascal Siakam rocked out. Tyrese Haliburton struggled again, but in a different way. And the Cavs tonight, important game for the Pacers. We got a lot to talk about on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, for me, it's St. Patrick's Day. I got my green I'm Irish necklace on. The Pacers won a game over the Nets in which they shot terribly from three and won by 20-plus points and almost held the Nets under 100. And Pascal Siakam was awesome, and Tyrese Haliburton's doing everything except for make threes. I've got a lot of numbers behind that, and we have a lot to get to today. And oh, by the way, the Pacers play the Cavs tonight, a chance to win their 4th out of 5 if they can get it done against the Donovan Mitchell-less Cavs, which has not mattered for quality of opponent all season. So boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to get to. And we are, of course, going to start with the Pacers' win over the weekend. Crushed the Brooklyn Nets in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. It was close to the first half, and the second half was all Pacers for the win. They end up winning by 21 points, but they were up by 2 at halftime. The second half in favor of the Pacers, 62-43 to get it done. And it was a really fascinating game to me because of how the Pacers won and why they looked so comfortable, right? They were 6 of 30 from three. I believe the Pacers had 3 made threes at halftime. Maybe I think they might have made a 4th one right before halftime. Either way, they were not making threes, generating some good looks. The Nets were generating and missing some good looks too, although they ended up at 40% from three. Pacers were not hitting at all from deep, and they're a team that likes to shoot. This is not a surprise for the Pacers, but since the All-Star break, they have not been a good three-point shooting team in the bottom 10, I believe, of three-point percentage teams in the league. They were in the top 6 before that, right? They're slumping right now. We'll talk about Haliburton's role in that specifically later on in the show, but they've been relying on the three, and they know it, and it's been a weapon for them, and sometimes that's been good. Recently, it has not, and in this game, it was not. Now, prior to this game, this Nets game, the Pacers had won one time this season when shooting this poorly from three, making 6 threes, right? On the full season, they were 1-4 entering that game where they'd made 6 or fewer threes. And if you'll remember the one game, it was the New Year's Day game against the Milwaukee Bucks when they attempted 38 free throws, right? So they could still be efficient on offense by living at the line. Well, against the Nets, they made 6 threes, and they only took 16 free throws. The Nets almost doubled them up in free throw attempts. So how on earth did the Pacers win by 20-something? They dominated the paint. Absolutely dominated. I don't mean dominated the paint like, they did well defensively around the basket or they scored there. They had among their best games on offense and defense in the paint, and I think that is not the Pacers you'd expect to see all season. I get that the Nets are kind of crummy, but when you have, so the Pacers finished this game in the points in the paint battle plus 40 in points in the paint, 82-42. Unbelievable stuff. 82 points in the paint for the Pacers. Their season high is 84. In that game, they beat the Suns, and Devin Booker went crazy. But this was their second best night scoring in the paint all season. They are, sorry, I should have had this stat right in front of me, and I scrolled too far. The article, they are 6-1 this season in games in which they exceed 72 points in the paint. They're 14-6 now when they reach 64 points in the paint. Very good. Now, that seems obvious. Scoring lots of points from a specific, spot is good, especially when it's an efficient area like the paint. Typically, when you can get into the paint, that means there's a lot of defensive breakdowns for the opponent. It makes sense why you'd have a good record when doing that. But if you put the emphasis on it, and Rick Carlisle said after the game that Lloyd Pierce before the game reaffirmed, hey, guys, we need to be attacking the paint. We need to play inside out that way. And the Pacers heeded that message and dominated offensively in the paint. They look really good, right? They were really tough to stop, especially in that second half, without a 3-ball because they were still scoring all the time at the basket. Siakam was doing it with his buckets. We'll talk a lot more about Siakam later. Specifically, he made 11 shots, a team high for the Pacers, and he also had a bunch of offensive rebounds. Myles Turner cleaned up on the offensive glass. Jalen Smith cleaned up on the offensive glass. And basically everybody, I mean, if you look at the shot chart for the Pacers this game, it's comical how easy it was for them to score at the rim. Aaron Nesmith hit multiple shots right at the rim. Andrew Nembhard had a couple buckets right at the rim. Like every starter was just living at the basket. Myles Turner, who's been shooting well recently, all his makes right at the rim. Pascal Siakam, who had one of his best games of the season, only made 2 shots outside the paint, right? The Pacers were just dominant at the basket, and that's why they talked about it before the game, and that's why Lloyd Pierce brought it up. And if you'll remember, Jenny Bouchik's thing that she said at first, but I think the Pacers talk about this all the time and use this phrase, they say paint to great. They think they're at their best when they get into the paint, make the defense react to them in some way, a rotation, whatever, a coverage shift, a switch, something, and then play from there. Use your new advantage to get a better shot, or just take the good shot that you've now generated by getting into the paint. They're at their best when they play that way. And offensively, they absolutely dominated in that aspect of the game on Saturday. 82 points in the paint again. They're second best the entire season. They're great when they play that way. And they did it by attacking the rim, right? Their guards were special, getting towards the basket. TJ McConnell taking 14 shots typically means there's a lot of driving lanes, but 18 shots for Haliburton as well, right? That was just an availability. But they didn't just dominate the paint because they scored 82, right? That, of course, is tremendous and is the reason why they were able to dominate a game that they shot so poorly from 3. They outshot the Nets by 5% on the night, despite being 6 of 30 from 3, right? The Pacers also dominated the paint defensively, right? And that is sometimes playing good defense actually in the paint, contesting shots, making it hard. And that's also preventing the Nets from getting there. And the Nets aren't very good, but stylistically, they do like to attack the basket. They do drive a lot. They do attack the rim. They're not a high volume 3 team. So keeping them out of the paint is actually challenging, right? It is not an easy thing to do. Dennis Schroeder loves to get in there. He took 13 shots. Cam Thomas, of course, does as well. He took 16 shots, and the Pacers gave up 42 points in the paint. Their second best scoring night in the paint, 82. This was their second best defensive night in the paint at 42. They've only been under that once, right? So they had their second best offensive game and second best defensive game in terms of in the paint. They're 6-3 when holding a team under 50 points in the paint this season. So like similar to attacking the basket, obviously, protecting it equally important. And this wasn't a rim protection game. I'm not saying the Pacers did well defending the paint by saying, well, Myles Turner defended well, but Myles Turner was terrific around the basket and Jalen Smith filled it again. No, they were good at keeping the Nets out of the paint. Aaron Nesmith guarded Mikal Bridges extremely well. Didn't let him attack that deep. Andrew Nembhard guarded whatever guard he was on pretty well. Don't let them get deep into the paint, right? That is just as important as actually protecting and rotating well and communicating and having a big effect around the basket defensively. Carlisle said it after the game. They're an attacking team. They wanted to keep them out of the paint. Well, they did it. They had a lot of effort. They had a dialed-in game plan, and that's what they needed to do to win, is dominate the paint battle, which is not something you think of with the Pacers this season. Sometimes they outshoot a team. Sometimes they dominate the pace. Tonight, it was all about the paint. The interior and the Pacers, smaller-ish team sometimes, absolutely crushed it down there on both ends of the floor. One of their best defensive games of the season. Trenton Watford hitting a shot in the final seconds with the shot clock off for no reason to get the Nets to 100 points. Would have been the Pacers' second best total points allowed, if not for Watford scoring 4 points in the final minute. Would have been their best game in terms of points allowed. And to score 121 while making 6 threes and only 15 free throws is just remarkable numbers. They didn't turn it over very much. 17 offensive rebounds, a lot of points in the paint. That is a great win for the Pacers, a new way of doing it. That always shows something about a team to me when they can win a game in which all their usual quality of life identifiers aren't clicking, and the Pacers won by 21. And it's important. And I think what this can mean is if they continue to be a not very good shooting team, right? If Haliburton continues to struggle from there or whatever, this can be something they can rely on. If they can at least try to get into the paint as much as they can and dominate in there like they did in this game, that's at least something you can try to rely on if your typically good shooting isn't there, right? On the season, the Pacers still rank 10th in three-point percentage, right? That is over the course of the full season. But post-All-Star break, and they talked about this after the game when I asked, post-All-Star break, they are currently 27th in 3-point percentage, right? Like that says a lot about one, what they've been doing, and two, likely going to jump up at some point. Maybe not. They're playing different, their roster's different, but that is the reality of their situation. Whereas pre-All-Star break, they were fourth in 3-point percentage at 38. So if that continues to be a trend, and I'm of the belief that it won't for that long, I think Haliburton's going to get out of this slump, and I'll talk about why later. I think that, of course, their paint style is going to be important, but you can see where their offensive potency could climb back up if they can continue to defend the paint this well, albeit against better competition. That would go a long way, but that's how they beat the Nets on a night where their typical style wasn't there. Impressive win by the Pacers, and Pascal Siakam was great, and Tyrese Haliburton missed 8 threes, and he talked about it at practice over the weekend, and I'm going to talk about it and break out some numbers. We've got a lot more to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast, but first, got to talk to you guys about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role. And that is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, who have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion, with a B, professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is so simple when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing a ton of hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, so they're constantly trying to find ways to make it easier. They even have a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, so it's even faster and quicker and easier. And 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA, Locked On Warriors, or Locked On Lakers to hear about a yikes moment for the NBA, as Lakers Warriors should have been a marquee game for the standings for the Stars, has just the worst ending ever. On Saturday night, reviews on shot clock malfunctions, and no time is ticking off the clock, and it's been like a quarter hour of real time. Yikes. Should have been a fun game. It was close late, and that is the story. And you can hear about that from the people who cover the Lakers, Warriors, and the league here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's talk about a different game that happened Saturday night. Nets, Pacers. We first turn our attention to one Pascal Siakam. After the Bulls game, he took 12 shots. He took very few shots in the last 15 minutes of that game, as has been well documented by reporters and fans alike. And I said in the post-game show for that one, get Pascal Siakam the ball, right? Caitlin and I talked about that a little bit on Friday's show. Within the offense, they're finding ways to do it, but there's still some times where it's glitchy for them in a way that it shouldn't be. They need to find ways to keep him involved and get him shooting. In this game against the Nets, 22 shot attempts. Him and Haliburton took 40 shots for the Pacers. Only one other guy took over 10, and that was TJ McConnell. And Pascal Siakam, 6 free throw attempts. Him and Nesmith combined for 11 of the Pacers' 16. That's more like it. That is more like it for Siakam from a role perspective. He didn't just do that, right? 11 rebounds, 4 of them offensive, right? Once again, if you listened to last Friday's show, where we really dove into Siakam's role with the Pacers, the Z-bounds, his rebounding his own miss. He did well on the offensive glass. So 28 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, which actually I believe was tied for the most on the Pacers. Not a great passing night for the Pacers, who dominated the paint. 3 steals, which led the team. He was sensational, right? Plus 22. They dominated his minutes. The Nets, who have some wing-sized defenders, had no answers for him. This is what he can be at his best, especially against a team that is very flimsy defending around the basket. And Siakam just completely punished them. They continue to look good, especially recently when he is more involved. You know, his last couple games taking a ton of shots, or taking the right amount of shots, 22. In this one, they win by 21 points. He took 18 against the Pelicans. They won that game. They should have beaten the Timberwolves, or at least they were right there against the catless Timberwolves. He took 20 in that game, right? He took 20 when they smoked Charlotte before the All-Star break. He took 17 in Toronto when they won that game. He took 22 when they beat the Suns and were attacking the paint. They have some games where he takes a lot and they barely lose. Their record now, they have a winning record now after this game since the trade deadline, when he takes 15 plus shots. Now, sometimes I hate those stats when it's like the Pacers record, when, you know, random role player or whatever team even whatever role player takes this many shots is very good. Well, usually that role player is taking a lot of shots because they're being left open or they're feeling it and they're making shots. They keep taking them. And yes, if role players make shots, that tends to be a good thing for winning for a basketball team. It's usually with stars or guys who create their own shots where that's a little more meaningful because that can dictate a little bit more about the way they're playing or at least the way they're attacking certain matchups. I think, and as I've said on this, the Pacers are at their best when Siakam is heavily involved and has a very not too scoring heavy, but pretty scoring heavy role. And in this game, 28 points showed a lot of that. And they continue to use him in a way that's meaningful. One, from his size perspective, but two, just because what he can do for them now, you're seeing their rotation shift a bit. And we got Rick Carlisle to talk about this a little pregame, but they do try to get 48 minutes, or at least as close to it as they can. They do still go full 5-man bench sometimes. They do try to get, though, close to 48 minutes with one of Haliburton, Siakam on the floor at all times. And then, of course, both of them as often as they can. And so some of that getting both of them leads to the 5-man bench groups. But you keep seeing the Siakam plus bench group evolve, right? I think especially once Mathurin got hurt and TJ McConnell was just ball handler extraordinaire for the second unit, they needed to find a way to kind of tweak it to get more ball handling there. And they have and succeeded with Haliburton plus McConnell. But I think Siakam specifically is working pretty well, both because he's a good ball handler, but also because the way to do it is what they've been doing is Obi Toppin comes in earlier and plays with the starters, and he just very naturally can slot in with what they're doing, where he comes in with McConnell. The two ball handlers are Haliburton and McConnell, with then Nesmith and Toppin as like effective spot up guys, and then Turner's in there. And then that lets Siakam be a ball handler with the bench and still maximizes Toppin, who's been playing very well recently with the starters for more minutes. And so that's helpful for a lot of ways. I think that's a good rotation balance they have right now. But Siakam plus the bench continues to be awesome. With 0 starters besides Siakam now after this weekend, the Pacers are plus 30 in 85 minutes. That's terrific. With 2 or fewer starters, the Pacers are plus 34 with Siakam plus at least three bench guys, right? That's very good. With Siakam plus any number of starters that isn't the starting lineup, they're plus 44, right? So they're doing well with creative lineups involving him. I think that's a result of what we talked about last week with Kalen, where they're figuring out how to use him better, and he's figuring out where his spots are going to be within this offense better, and it just is a little more natural. And again, this Brooklyn team doesn't have the perfect players to defend him. They're kind of rudderless right now anyway. But he played very well to exploit that. And I think when he is involved and the Pacers know how to get him involved, especially in a game like this where dominating the paint is so important, he can have such a huge impact. And he did today. I think that was good work by the Pacers to find a way to get him involved. And he was a big part of their paint dominance on both ends. Rick Carlisle said that this was, to him, the best Pascal Siakam defense game of the season for this Pacers team. There's a reason he was plus 22, which was a team high for the Pacers. Only Haliburton was above plus 16 besides Pascal Siakam, which is my way of transitioning to Tyrese Haliburton, both because I talked to him about it and asked him questions about it over the weekend, but also because he had another rough shooting game. Tyrese Haliburton in this game. This is important to kind of tie all this together, and this is going to tie across the end of this segment into the next one. Tyrese Haliburton had 14 points, well below his season average, even below his post-All-Star break average. He had 7 rebounds, only 4 assists. Pacers, again, were really attacking the paint. They were still passing okay, but they weren't like setting up shots they're passing. 2 turnovers, 2 steals, 1 block, and yet was plus 19. Still a dominant figure for this Pacers team. 1 for 9 on threes. Another rough shooting night from deep. 6 for 18 in total, but if you do backwards math, that's 5 for 9 from 2. Above average inside the arc. Listing all his stats does not accurately detail the game we saw, but I think the key part of this is, and I will talk about and break down his shooting in just a second. He views it as a slump, certainly. You know, he's trying to not think about it in games and just keep shooting, which is why he took 9. You could see the relief on his face when he made one. And I think he, like I said with Buddy Hield a long time ago, has to keep shooting to get out of it. Because if you just stop shooting, the defense wins and you're a much worse and less impactful player. He was still plus 19, right? Even when he's missing a lot of the time, he is still a mega impactful player, putting up big numbers for the Pacers because of the way opponents respect him and defend him, whether that's running him off the line or still sending two to him because of his passing or whatever. Like Tyrese Haliburton is still good and putting up good numbers. I want to contextualize them in just a second about his post All-Star break level, talk about his shooting and his slump, share his comments, and then talk a little bit about the Cavs to close out today's show. But first, we have to talk about Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you can get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They can do all the shopping for you. It is the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season, whether you're prepping for an interview, a date, an event with your friends, whatever. Stitch Fix can help you easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that work for you. You just give them your size, your budget preferences, and boom, you can order boxes when you want, how you want. No subscription required. You can get 5 just for you pieces, outfit recommendations, pro styling advice. Whatever works, keep it. If not, send it back. It's the just right pieces with on-point fits. It makes it all so easy, and you'll look and feel very good. And again, if you don't love something, send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free with Stitch Fix, style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockdown. Again, that is stitchfix.com/lockdown. And one more time, stitchfix.com/lockdown. And we are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day on this lovely Monday. Make your second listen Locked On Nets. Hear what Doug and Adam have to say about the Nets and Mikal Bridges' game and the state of the Nets, who are in a super weird spot. They lost again to the Spurs on Sunday night, which means the Pacers' magic number for clinching a play-in berth, I believe, is 3 now. They could, if they beat the Cavs and beat the Pistons, and the Nets lose their game Tuesday night, the Pacers could clinch at least a play-in berth as early as Wednesday of this week. Obviously, they're going to make it. Not something to celebrate, but just a statement of fact because they just played the team that's in 11th in their conference. Let's talk more about Tyrese Haliburton, who was 1 for 9 from 3 in this game. At practice on Friday, I wanted to ask Tyrese Haliburton how he felt about his recent shooting and if he has any theory on why he's not shooting very well. He said, "I don't know. I have no answer. They feel good. So right now it's kind of good for me because I'm learning how to score without threes." So let's start there. He doesn't know. He did later say, which I'll spoil a quote, that he thinks it's a slump. I kind of ruined that already. But starting there, that's true. He is crushing it inside the arc during this slump, right? It's not a good thing that he is shooting poorly from 3, but his other counters, right? We've seen him get better at the floater. We've seen him get better as a finisher. And we've seen him be better in mid-range this season. When you look at the numbers since the All-Star break, the stretch where his 3 has just been atrocious, right? 22.4% from 3 for Tyrese Haliburton since the All-Star break. He's 55 for 88 on 2s. That's great. That's 62.5%. In March, that number's closer to 65% on 2s. On 3s in March, he's 10 for 56, 17.9%, right? That's obviously awful. But his 2-point percentage has been better. For his career, he's 55% on 2s, almost 10% better than that this month, which is saving him from a dismal, really, efficiency, right? He's averaging 16, 10, and 4 in his dozen games since the All-Star break, right? His assist number would be 3rd in the NBA if it was over the full season. Trae Young would be ahead, and he's like very, very close to Luka, but he's behind him. So he's still passing well, right? His role has changed. I talked about that to make it as simple as possible numerically, right? To kind of describe this role change. His scoring usage for the whole season is 24.61. Before the All-Star break, it was 25.23. After, it's 22.46. So a little more off ball, a little more deferring to other guys. And to back that up, right? He throws the 3rd most passes per game in the NBA this season, 70.7, behind Jokic and Luka, right? Before the All-Star break, he was throwing 69.8 passes per game. A lot, but less. Since then, it's 74.1, almost 5 passes more per game, which doesn't sound like much, but if you think about, what a game looks like for him, like you think about 1 extra pass per quarter, right? If you think about that exchange of usage for Haliburton, you can kind of see these just subtle changes where he's not playing different, but you can tell that as his shot has gone away and he's playing a little different, he's just changing a little bit of his effectiveness as a player. Not in a negative way. It's just how he's impacting the game has looked different. And so I think that all kind of ties into his 3. If he starts to make them, what is this player, this more passing player who now has Pascal Siakam as a teammate, what is he going to look like, right? We have 3 years of evidence that Tyrese Haliburton is a 40% three-point shooter. Heck, we have 3 months of evidence this season. Until his injury, he was at 40.3% this season, right? This is clearly a slump. And his later quote, as he continued to talk about his three is, it's just a little slump right now. All I've got to do is keep shooting. It will figure itself out. I agree, as I said earlier. And he tries not to think about it when he plays. He said, take what the defense gives him. You've seen that with the twos. And he just wants to make sure his volume's still high so teams still defend him in a way where he can attack the paint. So I think he'll get out of the slump. I also think he's evolving as the threes aren't falling to be a better passer, to find ways to impact the game without the three falling. You're seeing that in the numbers that he's moving it well, right? He's helping his teammates play well by making twos still. But, a different player. The numbers are worse for a reason. He's being helped by, again, Siakam's addition, the team finding other ways to succeed. But he's got to start making them at some point, right? Since the break, he's had 2 games out of 12 over league average shooting from 3. And one was that game. He's only 40% game from 3 since the All-Star break. That very first one against the Pistons, where I thought he looked like himself again. I wrote a story about it. I asked him about it. And then that hasn't happened since. The 3 for 8 night against the Pelicans, the only other one. I am of the opinion there's some other stuff, right? Kaylin said last Friday she thinks he looks injured. He's not taking that one-legged fall away from the right wing anymore. That's not even the best way to describe that shot. But anyway, you can see it. Like if you watch Tyrese Haliburton all season, you can see that it looks a little different, I suppose. But to me, it is like he got 9 threes up against the Nets over the weekend, right? And none of them were like, what are you doing, level threes? To me, it is a slump. I don't know if he's going to touch 40% again this season, but I think he'll be better at some point. The sooner, the better for the Pacers, especially with the road trip coming up and some better opponents. But that is my take on it. And after digging into the numbers and talking to him about it, I agree with what he's saying. That said, the longer it goes, the more you kind of go, I wonder what is actually going into this, because 17% over 12 games is whew. But he is making up for it with the twos. Passing is still mostly there. And looking better in terms of the other stuff besides the shooting that he's doing. Last thing for today, the Cavs are in Indy tonight. Pacers have not lost to the Cavs yet this season. So there's a lot of interesting ways I could have gone with this, right? Because the first thing I wanted to do, and I thought about this last week, was, the Cavs look way different. It's going to be a fascinating game. Like they didn't take hardly any threes early in the season when the Pacers played them twice, but now they're 8th in the league in 3-point attempts. And, Darius Garland gets him up, right? He's still playing. Donovan Mitchell's now getting him up, and now they play Sam Merrill more, and he gets him up, and LeVert takes more, and Max Strus just bombs away, and that's all great. That's been huge for the Cavs, and Jared Allen's been better, but Donovan Mitchell's not playing. Donovan Mitchell's hurt. He's out. He tried to play in their last game. He didn't feel as effective. He's out. He has a nasal fracture. He got an injection in his knee. He's not playing. Evan Mobley, fantastic defender for the Cavs. He's also out. He's got a left ankle sprain. And then Max Strus has a knee injury as well. Dean Wade, one of their better defenders, also has right knee soreness. So on one hand, the Cavs are a different team. They're going to come in with Darius Garland and Jared Allen and Karis LeVert and a bunch of guys who want to get up threes like Niang, like Okoro, like Sam Merrill, and they could just have a high variance night, right? They take a lot of threes. Garland is one of the most underrated players in the league to me. He's a great creator. They're still going to be threatening to me, but it's really hard to get the gist of what they are. They just got the doors beat off of them that's not a phrase. They just got smoked by the Rockets in their last game. They've lost 3 of 4. They lost to the Nets. They lost to the Suns. They did smoke the Pelicans, though, which was a surprising result. But you know how they beat the Pelicans in that game? They shot it extremely well from 3. They won that game by 21 points, and they were 20 of 45 from 3. 23 is going to do it. And that is, they had Donovan Mitchell for that game, but he wasn't even that sensational. It was Garland making 6. It was Sam Merrill making 5. It was Niang making 4. All those guys are going to play. Mitchell did make some, but you get the gist. Like this Cavs team is way different than the one the Pacers saw early in the season that they were able to beat, in that they get up threes now in a more meaningful way that increases their variance, that increases their ceiling, although it can make them a little less threatening, right? When they played in Cleveland early in the season, the Cavs took 31 threes. They made 12. They're well over that now with their attempts. To me, this is similar to kind of how I felt last week about Kobe White. is that if the Pacers can at least slow, not even like limit him, but like literally slow him down, like from a speed perspective, Darius Garland, it's going to just make the Cavs too choppy to get the shots they want all night, especially given their injury situation. That's easier said than done. They struggled with Kobe White at times, although they did a pretty good job, and they almost won that game. So that would be my key for the Pacers in this one. I think they are more talented than the Cavs. I don't think that matters because the Pacers season, it has not mattered who the more talented team on paper is. But it would be nice for the Pacers to get a win against a team that on paper and a team that, according to their strength of schedule, should be a tough opponent. But they have been blessed, and they need to take advantage of this. And if they win it, my God, will they be kicking themselves for that Bulls game, because they would be on a if they win tonight, they would have been on a 5-game win streak and 6 out of 7, with their only loss being an Anthony Edwards explosion. But DeMar DeRozan explosion, I guess, also counts. But that's where they're at with the road trip coming up. So getting that momentum, banking it, heading into their final road trip. They only have 3 games on the road the whole season after this road trip. If they can bank a win going into it, that'd be huge. I think they'll be ready for it. We'll, of course, be covering it here tomorrow night. We'll have more on Wednesday with a guest and Friday with a guest. And, of course, I'll be in Detroit for Pacers-Pistons, so we'll talk about that game after it. They play the Warriors later this week. So much still to come here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Let me know if I said something dumb by commenting down below on YouTube or tweeting at me at Tony R. East. And this show is at Locked On Pacers. If you want to see the topics for the show every day when the show comes out, that's the best way to do it. Thank you all a ton for listening today. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. We will see you very soon.